the flap of leathery wings as the dragon heaves itself into the air, the sulphurous smell as it unleashes the lance of its fiery breath, the dawning horror on the face of the adventurer who realizes that the dragon knows magic, the cruel intellect of the hoarding dragon. Today, let's delve into that most iconic of fantasy creatures, the dragon. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Just in Time Worlds with Marie Mullaney. Dragons is a massive topic, so I'm going to skim a lot of this very lightly. If you would like me to cover any of these topics in more detail, let me know in the comments below, and I will see if I can make a video on that topic. As always, we'll start with some history, in this case cultural traditions of dragons around the world, and then we'll plunge into the fantasy examples. If this kind of world building interests you, please do consider smashing that subscribe button, and if you want to support me in making more of these videos, buy my book or hit my Ko-fi page, and more about that at the end of the video. Okay, let's get cracking with cultural traditions of dragons. Our world has a rich mythology of dragons. In the West, we split our dragons into the brute and the thinker, where the brute is generally an unintelligent dragon that is there for the dragon slayer to bring down, and the thinker tends to be an evil, malevolent force that the hero must find a way of defeating. In the Chinese tradition, dragons are considered to be water deities and are connected with the divine. The same applies to the Aztec feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, who is a dragon in the Aztec tradition. In Africa, you also have your dragons connected to the divine. The rainbow serpent whose writhing created the canyons and valleys and whose dung created the mountains comes to us from the Dahomey mythology. If you would like me to explore any specific aspect of our mythology of dragons in more detail, let me know in the comments, and I will make a video specifically focusing in on that element of historical dragons. So that's our world's traditions of dragons in our mythological past. If you like this kind of exploration of mythological content, please do give this video a thumbs up. And let's move on to fantasy examples. First, I want to talk about dragons as villains. And specifically, I want to contrast two different types of dragon villains here. The first is Tolkien's dragons, specifically Smaug, versus the wyverns that we saw in the movie Reign of Fire. Now, I know that that is not entirely a fair comparison, but it does serve to illustrate the point. Reign of Fire used dragons just as a cool monster. That was literally all they were, which is why the movie is pretty much a forgettable movie. It was fun to watch, don't get me wrong. But I've never rewatched it because the dragons are just monstrous animals. They might as well be dinosaurs for all the difference that it made. Whereas in Tolkien's world, Smaug represents boundless greed and the evil that comes from hoarding others. He wants to own treasure without ever doing anything to earn that treasure. It is a central part of Tolkien's theming and storytelling is this dragon that hoards this treasure. Tolkien's dragons hold great power and they're very intelligent, but they are greedy and that greed makes them malevolent. So in contrasting these two dragons, you can see that while you can have just a cool animal or a cool monster effect, you can make a dragon villain so much more by tying it back into your world, back into the theme of the story that you're telling. Another tie back for dragons is typically in the magic of dragons. The author that I want to highlight here is Catherine Kerr's work and her dragons, which have got control of the fire element. Now, not only do they have control of the fire element, they can call forth volcanoes. And in one of the most dramatic books in the Devery series, one of the dragons threatens to call down a volcano on the town when her demands are not met. What this demonstrated was the power of dragons in their villainous aspect, and that their morality is so foreign to us as humans. It makes them a different creature. She did not see a problem with what she was saying. In much the same way, in Ursula Le Guin's world, the dragons of Earthsea aren't exactly evil, but they attack human villages. Why? Because they don't see humans as worthy of their time. And that kind of morality disjunct serves very well to illustrate an alien viewpoint on what we see as just and moral actions. And that alien viewpoint gives you a very different perspective on the themes that are being illustrated in the books. So those are some examples of dragons being used as, if not exactly antagonistic, at least not protagonistic. However, there are some authors who use dragons in a protagonistic or a force for good. The first example of this is using dragons to achieve independence or protection. This is typically where dragons form a partnership with your human protagonist. And for examples of these, let us turn to some of our iconic fantasy. The first dragons that I want to highlight is the dragons of Pern. These dragons are born from a scientific background in that they were created with DNA manipulation of the native life forms of the planet Pern. These dragons allow the colonists of Pern to fight back against the Thread, which is a global threat that threatens their colony. In the first book, it has been 400 years since the Thread fell, and people have forgotten how important dragons are, and it's just their cost that is counted, tying into the theme of fighting against adversity, which is not represented by a villain as such. It's people being people, and the main enemy of the books is a mindless organism that devours everything. Reviving the dragons in the face of that returning threat is a major element of the first book, and represents the people of Pern's ability to fight back and overcome adversity. How to Train Your Dragon also falls into this category of independence and protection. These dragons represent the protagonist training with their dragon, riding the dragon, and gaining independence through a mutually satisfying relationship. The dragons of A Song of Ice and Fire also fall into this category. They are tamed and ridden by the Valerians in prehistory, and later by the only surviving house of Valyria, the Targaryens. In the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, they represent not so much freedom as the power of old Valyria. These types of dragons typically have limited communication and are tameable through some means. In Pern, the dragons are impressed at hatching. In A Song of Ice and Fire, you need the blood of old Valyria. In How to Train Your Dragon, it's more like taming a regular animal through food that they like. With these dragons, it's the relationship with their rider that forms the most memorable bonds and ensures that the reader remembers these dragons with fond memories. Who of us has not, after all, dreamt of riding a dragon? If you have dreamt of riding a dragon, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, and let's talk about dragons as mentors. But dragons as partners are not the only positive dragon experience that you can have. You can also have dragons as mentors in the Eastern traditions. And indeed, it is in the Eastern tradition that I will turn to for my first example of this, which is Legend of the Five Rings, the role-playing game. In Legend of the Five Rings, dragons are manifestations of the primal forces that created the world. They don't represent a specific element so much as an idea. Fire, for example, represents the creativity in human nature. The Dragon of Thunder is not even connected to an element, but is instead linked to the heroic nature of man. And wasn't that just right on cue? This nature of dragons allowed Legend of the Five Rings to utilize dragons as a bringer of wisdom, as mentors to humans, as guides. The Legend of the Five Rings dragons plays the role of bringing humanity to their best selves. Another example of this is Falkor from the Neverending Story. The Luck Dragon is a mentor to our hero and also his mode of locomotion. He is wise friend, transportation, and fun companion all rolled into one. The TV series Merlin, with Arthur as a young prince and Uther Pendragon still on the throne, also utilizes dragons in this mentorship capacity. Merlin is a dragon lord who will grow up to be a dragon lord proper, but the dragon that he encounters is also his mentor and guide on this path. There is one author that I really feel I should highlight when it comes to dragons particularly, and that is the use that Rick Riordan makes of the mechanical dragon Festus. So let's talk about the happy dragon. Spoiler warning for the Percy Jackson books by Rick Riordan. Rick Riordan introduces us to the mechanical dragon Festus. Festus is a masterpiece of theming. He goes crazy after being activated and in seeking to protect Camp Half-Blood seeks to kill everything. Then after he is programmed correctly, the death of Beckendorf sends him off the deep end again, representing the debilitating effects of grief. He is tamed by Leo, who gives him the name Festus, and in naming him seals his loyalty and love, showing us the importance of loving things for what they are. He dies and is remade as the figurehead and control center of the Argo II, showing us the power of rebirth and dealing with grief. Finally, Festus the dragon is reborn from the destruction of the Argo II, and he carries a dying Leo to Ogygia, where he is reunited with Calypso, again showing the nothing ever truly dies theme, and the power of love and the importance of keeping your promises. This is especially poignant since Percy broke his promise to Calypso to see her freed, but Leo and Festus kept that promise. So the key takeaway from all this is that dragons are iconic and they are beautiful, and when your reader encounters them for the first time in your world, they will feel a sense of recognition and an immediate feeling of connection. Don't waste that feeling. Don't make your dragons forgettable. Make them part of your theme. Tie them back to your world. Bring them into your magic. Make them a core part of the world that you've built, and your dragons will be remembered. Treat them with the gravitas and respect due to such an iconic imaginary creature. And that is my take on dragons in a fantasy world. I hope that you enjoyed that episode of Just in Time Worlds. If you did, please do hit the thumbs up button. It really does help the channel grow. If you want to support me in making more of these videos, you can buy my book, The Hidden Blade, or you can visit my Ko-fi page where you can buy memberships, give one-off donations, or browse my shop for more. And I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time Worlds.